Is that you, Harry?
This is me. Is this Debbie?
It is. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am thrilled to be speaking with you, and most thrilled that it's about this movie. Wow. Harry, you are amazing in this film. You knock it out of the park. You bring this edgy, scared shitless, but trying not to show it persona. But then you find this layering, this emotional layering of curiosity on top of fear. You just balance these emotions, and then in the third act, you go into blinding rage and insanity that is just off the charts. Brilliant. I have seen so many of your performances, Harry, and this one tops them all for me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Debbie. What a great way to start a call off. Thank you. It means a lot. I really appreciate those kind words.
The film as a whole, I am beyond enthralled with. The whole premise of it and the way Jacob has constructed it visually is so beautifully done, from the cinematography to the rapier editing. But the emotion of this film rises and falls on James, on you, and you bring it. The intensity that you have is mind-boggling. I have to wonder, what did you feel when you first read this script and then you had to start embodying James and this psychological trauma that he endured and going down this rabbit hole?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I didn't have really words to explain how I felt after I watched it and after I read the script, and that was a first for me. Usually, you know, a whole bunch of words start kind of like swirling in your head and your mind, and you're trying to, pin down certain things that you want to do with the character. And this one, I just sat there and just had to think about it for a long time and couldn't get it out of my mind. At that point, I was reading a couple different scripts, but that one just really jumped out at me because I had a lot of questions, and so many questions that, I went and we had a call with Jacob Gentry, and it was like a couple hours of us just talking about not just the script, but kind of the meaning of this idea, thematically, kind of where the journey of this character goes, but also these intrusions that when you go and do some research, and it's a very quick YouTube or down the rabbit hole of Google, you find these intrusions that have happened before,
Mm-hmm.
and the most famous one, the Max Headroom Incident, which happened in 1987, 30 years after, we still don't know why they did it, who did it, and people are still, to this day and to this year, are still writing articles about it, trying to put more theories out, saying that they maybe have figured it out. And I don't know, it's just, I guess it's something in us, and the human condition, or just the human side of us, just wanting to just know answers and just know why. And that really intrigued me, and specifically with James' character, of putting the audience in his shoes, really, and kind of putting a detective hat, like the armchair detective, and trying to really figure out if he can really figure this out, but having the stakes of possibly connecting to something that was very meaningful to him.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really love about the story and about your character, is because James is looking at this with two sides of his brain. The emotional side with a trauma that's unexplained to this day, and then as an editor who is, you're so exacting with editing and you're so precise, but you're also crafting a story. So it leads to the ambiguity and makes the audience wonder, is James crafting his own story here with the events that are happening and the actions that he takes? And it's really fascinating to watch you, just watching your face, Harry. The emotion that you get and the quizzical nature, the curiosity that comes out is really incredible to watch, especially when you've got Scott pushing in on an ECU of you. The intensity is just fabulous, fabulous. You elevate this so much and really make it a pot boiler.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I also think, like, you're only as good as the people you're surrounded by. And Scott Feely, he's just, with working with Jacob was just such a pleasure. But when working with Scott was also someone who just knew Chicago. He knew he was there at that time, kind of just knowing the city and kind of really putting that in the lens, Chicago in the lens and that feeling there beyond, the architecture. And, it is a very photogenic city in a lot of ways, but I think also it takes a skilled cinematographer to be able to capture that. But I particularly enjoyed, knowing what he was doing as well. I think also coming from a visual learner and being able to just sit in the performance and trust what he's doing is kind of in line with, I guess, I wouldn't say what I'm thinking, but there's just this unspoken kind of understanding that really happened between, the crew and even the other actors. And we had a lot of great Chicago actors that kind of brought something really different and was very surprising because there's a lot of the actors, Chicago theater actors and veterans in that case, and have done so much great work, but this particular film was just exciting because they all got to play like really different characters that they wouldn't get to play in really other films. So that was really exciting to have this incredible team kind of come together and tell a story that no one really knew what we were really telling at the end of the day outside of following this guy's journey into the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have to ask you, did you get to see Dan Martin's intrusion videos?
Yeah.
Did you?
I saw them plenty of times. So much so that I kept thinking about it when I would go back to the apartment and try to go to sleep. This film, there's a lot of practical filmmaking. There's analog, even so much so to the point of Ben Lovett, our composer, would put the score through a VHS machine to still get that grainy, that popping sound, so it just sounded like it came from an analog device, which it did. But seeing these on the screen, it just helped. A lot of times, when you shoot a movie, they're figuring out how to do the special effects or the VFX, and then they just put a green screen, and you have to do your best to kind of having that reaction. So I was very lucky and fortunate that everything was pretty practical, so I saw it in real time.
Yeah, because looking at your face as the intrusions would pop up as you're trying to edit, and all of a sudden there they are, and your face was just one of great surprise, and it looked like genuine surprise. Not that you're surprised at looking at a green screen. And I have to commend you, Harry, on your deftness with working the old analog editing equipment. Because I was doing editing and news and production work back in the late 70s. So there was no digital then. It was all analog. And I got to tell you, doing video, VHS editing, it's a pain in the butt when you're so to watch you and the adroitness and the deftness that you had really spoke volumes to how intently you got into this role.
Oh, thank you. I think every detail, like Jacob, he's all about the details and the little things, even to like the zip code and area code of a certain part of Chicago. So like I knew I had to step up my game in trying to make sure that I was coming across as authentic as possible, but also leaning on Jacob, because his De Palma's and then Blowout and the Conversation, those films are some of his favorites, and it became some of my favorites because I wasn't introduced to it until he brought it to my attention before this film. And watching those, my whole world just kind of turned upside down in such a great way because I never really got to watch a lot of 1970 like the cinema during that time, or really being familiar with that. So to me, I think it really helped to kind of have him as a guide, but also it was important for me to at least, I just feel like movement in general is sometimes something that a lot of performers might, I wouldn't say disregard, but not put as much emphasis. And, I come from a background of movement, so that was always just really important to me.
And that movement certainly, that history of movement certainly does come into play in this film, because not only are you in, 99% of the film, but there is a lot of movement, a lot of running, a lot of action, and then we get to that third act where you just explode. How challenging was it for you, because you are in almost every scene, if not every scene, how challenging was it physically for you and emotionally to stay in that mindset, as well as the physicality that comes with it, especially when you get into the farmhouse third act sequence?
I think it's also just really great direction from Jacob, and I'm a big believer, and it doesn't work. I think it doesn't work for all films, but I think in general for me is just holding it together as long as possible until you have to explode. There's no place it can go but outwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more you keep it inwards, which James was doing, and even though he was trying to keep it together and just any new information that would come in, he would either throw it out if it wasn't aligned with kind of his, whether if it's his beliefs or just the ending or conclusion that he was hoping for, or the answers that he was hoping for, or really going down and exploring that, but not really feeling a certain way about it outside of confusion and trying to not have his emotions overtake his decisions, which at the end of the day, a lot of people can't help but do that. But, I always look at it, it just becomes a lot more engaging and interesting when you don't hold all your cards out, and if informing who the character is and where they come from is all told through action. I always find that to be a little more interesting, and Jacob agreed, so we kind of really just made sure to explore that as much as possible throughout the film.
Now, because of the very nature of this film, were you guys shooting it relatively chronologically, or were you really jumping around because of the emotional beats that you have to hit? I'm curious.
Yeah, Jacob really fought to try and do it as chronological as much as possible, just so it doesn't bone us if we had a great idea and we just ran with it, and it would obviously just completely shift and muddle the film. So, we shot a lot in chronological order. There are moments we had to shoot kind of the third act of the film, kind of towards the beginning, but I think they did a great job. Our UPM and all involved just made sure to, if we were going to do that, it wasn't pivotal scenes that we can, I guess, manipulate in post if we needed to. So that was really helpful. That was very, very helpful, because if we didn't do that, I don't know how the film would have turned out.
Did you get any rehearsal time, and particularly because of that James-Alice dynamic that's happening? That creates such great ambiguity as to whether Alice is involved in what James thinks is happening, or is she part of it? Is she promulgating it? So I'm curious if you had any rehearsal time, or if you tried to keep that just as fresh as possible.
Yeah, I think, I always like rehearsals, and I think Jacob and Kelly, we all do, but, when you're shooting an indie that, your very limited time. I don't think we have the luxury. We didn't have the luxury of rehearsals outside of, right before, kind of 10 minutes before you put it on film, or sometimes the rehearsals were put on film. But one particular scene, I think the bar scene was something that I kind of really demanded, and to try and like shave a lot of time and from some other place that might not have been needed, to get at least like an hour, like a strong hour of just trying to figure out, because there was, this kind of back and forth between, the shots and meaning like the passing the shots through, like that stuff, we figured it out there. It wasn't written in the script, to try and give it a different energy and a little bit of levity while still giving information out between who these two people really are and what journey they might possibly go down on. So that was, I think, like really, really important for us to kind of get that, because, when Alice comes in, like you said, the ambiguity and also it informs us a little more of like what do these people want from each other and from themselves at the end of the day. And I thought that was really, really important for us to at least just explore as much as possible before we put it on film.
It worked beautifully, and I got to tell you, Harry, if you're going to put your name as an executive producer on a film, this is one to have your name on. Let me tell you. And now I want my sequel. You have this set up perfectly. There's the trunk. I just said to Jacob and I are just referring to it as the trunk. I want a sequel. I'm just saying.
Hey, if there's the demand is there, well, that's something like the trunk itself. Yeah, is a whole universe in itself. So we can spend a whole 90 minutes exploring that. But no, thank you so much. This has been so sweet and really, really put a smile to my face, because that's all I want, is to just have people have millions of questions and enjoy the film. So, and I really appreciate your kind words.
Oh, Harry, job well done, and I can't wait to talk to you again in the future.
You too. Thank you. Bye.